The 2020 NFL draft class is already off to a good start, with players like Pro Bowlers in Chase Young, Justin Jefferson, and of course quarterbacks like Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and Tua Tagovailoa. The 2020 draft class will now be entering their second season, and a lot of those players are expected to take big leaps, and that's what we are going to discuss in today's video. We are going to discuss players that we think make the Pro Bowl for the first of hopefully many times in 2021, and there are going to be no limits on positions or players or teams, because some of the players play on teams that may not be very good this year, while others play on prominent teams that may be making a Super Bowl run. And a player that really broke out in his second season in 2020 that eventually became a Super Bowl champion was linebacker Devin White for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the question entering the 2021 NFL season will be, what player can realistically make that leap in 2021? Now, before we dive into everything, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as each only take a second to do and it would be very much appreciated. Now, let's begin. Now, before we dive into the first player, what I do want to say is there were a lot of promising rookies in 2020, and if I do not include a player on your favorite team, that does not mean that he cannot make the Pro Bowl this year, because that is certainly not the case. I just wanted to get that clear before we dive in, and the first player that could make the Pro Bowl, and I do think will make the Pro Bowl this year, is Jeudy of the Broncos. Now, Jeudy, as we know, was one of the best receiving prospects in the draft coming out, as he was a top 15 pick for a reason, and he was the number 2 receiver drafted only behind his Alabama teammate Henry Ruggs. Now, Jeudy went on to have over 850 yards in his rookie season, which honestly in itself is not as impressive as Justin Jefferson, but it really isn't that far off considering what Jeudy had to work with. And if Jeudy gets consistent quarterback play in 2021 with either Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, which by the way is possible, then Jeudy could be over and probably will be over 1,000 yards in a 17-game season. Remember, it was him and Tim Patrick manning the receiver room for the Broncos for most of the 2020 season because Cortland unfortunately tore his ACL really early in the year. So Jeudy expected to take a big step, to me, is pretty realistic, and I do think it will happen, and I think it culminates in a trip to Orlando. And next is Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals, who unfortunately, as we know, had his rookie season cut short due to a torn ACL and MCL. Now, Joe had a pretty solid start to his career, and although the wins weren't there, and that is expected given the Bengals were pretty bad in 2019 as they had to finish with the worst record in the league to acquire Joe Burrow and his services for what we presume to be the next decade, Joe was on pace to finish with over 4,300 yards passing and 21 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, and on top of it, he was projected to have another 5 rushing touchdowns to add to that. And I do think Joe Burrow, and this isn't a bold prediction by any means, but I do think he will come back from the injury and play better in 2021 than what he did last year. And throw in that he's getting the best receiver in the draft and arguably the best receiving prospect in the past 5 years in wide receiver Jamar Chase, and it quickly points to Joe Burrow having a monster second season. So Joe Burrow having a good year and the Bengals at least improving from what they were last year does point to that in 2021, and I am very much looking forward to seeing Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase from the collegiate level to now the professional level. And although I think we can agree that the Bengals did need an offensive lineman, I am glad that they took Jamar Chase strictly because we get to watch Burrow to Jamar for the next decade, and those two will be fun to watch. And a player that I did not include in today's video for the second year players to make the Pro Bowl is T. Higgins, and not to say T will 100% make it because wide receiver positions are limited, and there are plenty of good receivers that we have in the NFL currently. T could have over 1,100 or 1,200 yards and be in the conversation for making a Pro Bowl, just like his teammate Joe Burrow. Now, having done 2 former SEC players and one being one of his former college teammates, I do want to quickly discuss Henry Ruggs and the possibility of him being in the Pro Bowl this year. And I do want to say I don't think Henry Ruggs will be a Pro Bowler this year because I don't think the offense will shift towards him heavily. And I do think he obviously has the potential to be a Pro Bowler as he was a top 12 pick for a reason. And let's just get something clear. He was not the 12th overall pick because because of a fast 40. Ruggs is 6 feet tall and nearly 195 pounds, and he is a lot more than just a 5'8", 160-pound track star. He is a lot more than that, and he was selected above players like Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, and Justin Jefferson for a reason. I just don't think he'll make today's video because of players like Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, and Darren Waller all being on that offense, and because of that, I don't think Ruggs will necessarily get the touches and opportunities to become a Pro Bowl player in 2021. So we are now going to shift from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball for at least this player, and it is one of my favorite young players in the NFL, and it is 49ers defensive lineman Javon Kinlaw. Kinlaw will be 24 years old in the middle of the 2021 season, and during the draft process in 2020, he was known because he had a bit of a rough story coming up, and he was described as a very hungry player and a player that had a relentless work ethic, and more often than not, when players have relentless work ethics, combining that with good coaching and good players to play alongside them, like Nick Bosa, for example, they are going to more than likely thrive, and that is the reason for this pick. Now, Kinlaw did not have a bad rookie season, even with Bosa being out for most of the year. He had over 30 tackles, which does not sound a lot on the surface, but you have to remember he is a interior defensive lineman, so he's never going to be a prime Ray Lewis racking up 150 tackles out here, and if he is, then just hand the Defensive Player of the Year award to him for several years in a row. And on top of it, he had 4 quarterback hits, which again, I don't think is bad given the situation. And by the way, Kinlaw also had a pick 6, so good for him in that. But I do think Kinlaw, with the emergence of Nick Bosa coming back and with Eric Armstead being there with him, I do think Kinlaw will step up, and I do think he will become a Pro Bowler for the first of hopefully many times in 2021. And the next player we are going to discuss is Cardinals linebacker Isaiah Simmons. And Isaiah was a hybrid do-it-all prospect coming out of Clemson in 2020, as the confusion or kind of knack on his game to NFL prospects or NFL analysts was, where are you going to play Isaiah? Because some thought he was a little too slow to play strong safety or free safety for that matter, but that was kind of put to rest when he ran a sub 4.4 40 in Indy at the 2020 Combine. Again, that was pre-COVID, so there was a 2020 Combine, but the disappointment in Isaiah's rookie season was the Cardinals essentially just flat out didn't play him, and for the first 7 games or so, he did not have a single game over 50% of the defensive snaps, and it was culminated in a win over Seattle at home in which Isaiah played just 5 snaps, and ironically on one of those snaps he had an interception against Russell Wilson at the end of the game, and I do remember tweeting live something along the lines of, you play Isaiah Simmons and this type of things happen, and I wanted the Cardinals to eventually play him more, and obviously they did towards the end of the year, and let's just be clear, my tweet had absolutely zero to do with that, nor am I claiming it did, but I was happy to see towards the end of the year that Isaiah was getting more snaps, as you don't spend a top 8 pick on a player to not play him, and I get that Isaiah was raw coming out of Clemson, but I do love his potential and the instincts that he has and the athleticism that he has, as it is borderline Cam Chancellor. Now, Isaiah does not hit as hard as Cam Chancellor, as very few people do, to be clear, but I do love the potential of him in the 2021 Cardinals defense, and getting pressure from players like J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones all year long will only help players like Isaiah Simmons out on the back 7. He is going to be able to get lanes open for him by those players like J.J. and Chandler Jones, and he's not only going to be able to fill those holes in the run game, but he's also going to have shorter time to cover players because of the increased pass rush. So I do love the potential of Isaiah Simmons in 2021, and definitely think he could reach the Pro Bowl for the first time this year. And before I say the final player in today's video, I do want to say there are a bunch of other players that I just did not include in today's video, and by me not including them does not mean they suck and they're never going to make a Pro Bowl. Let's just get that clear. But the final player in today's video is Clyde EdwardsHelaire, the Chiefs running back, and to be completely honest, I will be targeting him a lot in fantasy redrafts, and I actually just picked him up in a Dynasty League because I think Clyde is going to excel greatly behind the Chiefs offensive line, and as we know, and as I've said several times, Patrick got killed in the Super Bowl, and obviously the Chiefs did everything in their power to make sure that does not happen again, and we saw that by all of the offensive line acquisition and focus that they paid to the offensive line this year. And having said that, that benefits Patrick, but that also benefits Clyde EdwardsHelaire. And I do think Clyde will be more of the feature back this year, and Lev Bell just got released, and we saw his comments to Andy Reid, and there's nobody like that going to be taking away Clyde's touches this year. And because of that, I do think Clyde will be the direct beneficiary and have a legitimate good shot at going to the Pro Bowl and being a 1,500-yard all-purpose back. Now, some other players I left out. Again, Justin Herbert, left him out because I just thought it was too obvious to include him in today's video. Like, he'll probably be a Pro Bowler. Patrick Queen for the Ravens also has a good shot. I love CeeDee Lamb's chances of getting to the Pro Bowl. He was a 900-yard receiver last year without Dak for most of the year, so I do think he definitely has a good shot. And one final player that I also think has a good shot is Antonio Gibson of the football team. We know how good he was last year, and there is a really good chance that he can get to Orlando this year. And anyways, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, if you ever have a video suggestion, please let me know in the comments. And until next time, have a great day. Love you guys. Deuces. Peace.